And I'd like to welcome everyone to our virtual 2020 Plus Program Expo. This is Data Plus Room 3, and we are about to have a presentation from our Healthy Eating in Young Children group. They've been working since May. We're really proud of everything they've done this summer. And I'd like to introduce Zuchun Shea, Michelle Huang, Ellen Mines, and Clara Sapchik, and they're going to discuss their work this summer.
Great, I guess we can get started. My name's Ellen, and we are Project 22, Computational Tools to Improve Healthy and Pleasurable Eating in Young Children. And this past summer, we've been studying Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, or Arfid, which you can kind of understand as very picky eating to the point where it impacts your health, like either nutritionally or psychosocially. And this is a fairly recent disorder. It was characterized in 2015 in the DSM-5. So we're looking to just explore more about this disorder, and we're focusing on two main sides. So on the screening side, we want to really help parents understand when they need to see a professional if their kid is a picky eater. And then on the treatment and diagnostic side, when kids have been diagnosed, like what is the best treatment plan for them?
All right, so diving a little deeper into our first objective of creating a more efficient screening tool for Arfid, we've been going about this task through the use of a random forest algorithm. And the goal is to identify the most powerful predictors of Arfid. And we've basically split this into two different tasks. Ellen has been looking at clinical and behavioral subscales and measuring how predictive they are in determining if a child has Arfid. And then I've been looking at participants' individual food preferences and creating those into different food variables and analyzing their predictive power. And Ellen will tell you a little bit more about her model.
Yeah, so on the clinical side, we've been using subscales that kind of measure different behaviors. So things that clinicians would use, behaviors that are associated with autism, behaviors around food, and one scale that looks at the impact of psychosocial problems on your behavioral and emotional states. So one example of that is at the top of the permutation feature importance graph, which is using random forest to look at the most important features that will help to predict Arfid versus non-Arfid participants. You'll see that peers at the top of the list, and that's just a measure in the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire, which asks whether these participants have problems associating with their peers. And so we can see which variables correlate the most highly with Arfid.
All right, and then moving on to the other model, the food preference model, we can see that it scored a little lower in terms of accuracy compared to Ellen's model, only 64%. And when we look at the permutation feature importance, we can see that most of the food variables did score better than the random variable, third from the bottom, which is a good sign. But I think where the concern comes in is when we look at the confusion matrix, we see a lot of false positives. But this isn't the worst problem in the world, because we would much rather kind of over consult parents to see their child about them potentially, see a doctor about their child potentially having Arfid than completely skipping a consultation. And future work would just be improving the model's accuracy through various methods and hopefully incorporating both of the models into a streamlined Arfid diagnosing screening in the future.
Yeah, so for the Arfid treatment part, the biggest challenge for this part is to let children try new food. And this issue seems simple. Why don't we just give them the food similar to what they are already able to eat? But however, it is hard to define similar in this case. For example, someone will say like two food are similar based on the color, but other will say they are similar based on the taste. So what are we trying to do here is to recommend new food to children based on what similar picky eats eat, and we try to find the best applicable categorizing method to use here. And the first thing we tried is grouping food based on picky children's perception. Though we tried to apply several dimension reduction and clustering methods, we failed to obtain effective models. So we tried another approach. We tried to calculate the distance between foods based on children's experience of trying them. And based on the distance, we create a heat map on the slide that shows the closeness between each pair of food. The X and Y axis are different kinds of food, and the color represents the distance. The dark color means the two foods are close to each other. For example, from the heat map, we can see like ice cream, pudding, yogurt, and eggs are close to each other, which makes sense. And the heat map is further combined with our food exploration tool.
So as Alan mentioned earlier, one of the big problems with Arfid is that children have a very limited variety in their diets, and this can cause nutritional deficiencies. So we want to try to expand the types of foods that they're willing to try. And in order to do that, we created this food exploration webpage for them so that they can sort of see what types of foods are similar to the ones that they like to eat. So right now, these points are positioned based on the sensory qualities that kids rated, as Suchun was mentioning earlier. And we also have the option to include food recommendations. So this sort of incorporates the heat map work that she was doing, because when you click on a point, there are some other smaller stars that appear, and those are the ones that are most frequently tried by the kids who have tried the food that they clicked on. And we also have a function to show the nutrition facts for these foods. So when you hover over a point, the nutrition facts will show up on the side. In addition, there's also the choice to filter by a certain category, for example, with fruits and vegetables. So you can click on a fruit or whatever picture is at the bottom to find where that point is. And this just gives a way to gamify food exploration for these kids, because Dr. Zucker, the clinician on our team, has mentioned that children are very logical. So they really want some sort of reasonable explanation as to why they might like a certain type of food. And the end goal here is ultimately to, like I said, increase the variety in their diets and hopefully alleviate some of the nutritional deficiencies that they have. And the future work with this exploration tool is to hopefully turn that into a mobile application so that it's a little more convenient to use, since parents might want to use it when they're on their phones, and it might be a little more accessible. So that's really a basic summary of our project. And if anybody has any questions, we're open to taking them now.
Yes, please feel free to put questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question.
A question for Clara. Would you mind going back to the slide you presented? Yeah, so with the food preferences confusion matrix, it looks like almost everyone was categorized as Arfid. And I know you mentioned there were a lot of false positives, but I'm wondering, is that really enough to say that food preferences can be accurately used to decide whether or not someone is an Arfid case?
At this point, I don't think so. Like, I would not be comfortable using the current model as like a screening tool. And I think part of the difficulty was that most of the participants within the data set were positive for an Arfid diagnosis, so it made the random forest algorithm difficult to use. So we would need to, I think, go back and split the data set into more equal groups between non-Arfid and Arfid to get better results there. Yeah.
So I think it's also interesting, right, if food preferences aren't a factor in determining whether or not someone is an Arfid case, right? So do you think this is enough to conclude that food preference isn't a major reason why someone would or wouldn't be an Arfid case, or is it just inconclusive?
I think it's more or less inconclusive. I don't think it would, this doesn't really rule it out, but definitely requires more exploration.
You know, when I had run some models in the past combining the clinical variables and food preferences, you know, the survey that we used asked questions about over 100 foods. And when you add all those preferences in, there is some distribution between the Arfid and non-Arfid groups that improve the accuracy of the model. But I think ultimately asking questions about individual foods isn't really an effective way to screen for, you know, Arfid cases. It takes a long time, and we just need to look for more effective ways, which I think is why Clara categorized it into different texture and tastes. So the short answer to your question is the model will need more work, but there is a little bit of significance there, maybe just not clinically yet.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat from Ethan, who wants to know if age was a factor in these models at all.
we didn't factor it in.
What was the age range of your sample, or do you know?
You know, if I had to guess, I would say mostly younger children, but I don't think we collected that information. But it was mostly parents who were filling this out for their kids, so.
So if you had 4 more weeks on this project, what would you have done to continue this work?
We definitely would focus on like improving the accuracy and validity of the 2 random forest models. I think we have a good start at this point, but we realize it's a lot more work than we initially anticipated, and hopefully we can continue that.
So we have a question about the random forests actually from Robert. He wants to know why random forests.
We decided to use random forests because, well, for one, they're fairly straightforward to use, I think, when you're just trying to do a binary classification. So personally, I just started coding this summer. I had never coded before working with Data Plus. But another pro to random forests is that because you're taking the averages of a bunch of decision trees, it's really hard to overfit your model. And so you can play with the parameters of the random forest and get a decent model with just like a little bit of experience. So this was our starting point, at least. Clara, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Okay. Another question. Was there any other demographic information collected about the families or children, like income or ethnicity or anything else?
By the time that we got the data to clean, we generally took off the identification information and just looked at the participants because privacy is a really sensitive thing, and the data that we were analyzing didn't really have much to do with demographics. Like, it wasn't really dependent on that. So that's why like the data sets that we used didn't really have that information.
Be interesting to know if that affected anything at all. Yeah. Is there any plan for continued research on this stuff after Data Plus that you're aware of?
I think
I think in terms of the random forest, we would hope to create that screening tool at some point, and yeah, I think that's still a future goal that everyone wants to work towards. So
yeah. Well, Robert says he likes the idea of food exploration as a treasure hunt, and I have to agree. I think gamifying the whole, like, well, I like apples, and then like clicking apples and seeing what else you might like, that's actually really, you know, I think the kids could even maybe use this app, you know, when they're out and about, what they can eat or what they might like to try in new environments, you know. Yeah.
Sorry, there is a possibility of turning it into a game, because if kids are willing to try foods that are closer to the ones that they like, maybe they would earn 1 point. But if they're willing to branch to something that's further or in a different category, maybe they could earn more. So that's something else that we could explore in terms of actually turning it into a game.
That would be really cool. Yeah, I could see that going places. So you've gotten some great kudos from your project leads on this project, but I was going to ask the project leads if they had anything they wanted to share about, you know, what they learned from the team over the summer. Nancy? Guillermo?
I always screw up the terminology, whether I'm considered a project lead or that's Young and Alice. So no, so I think that, you know, it's always just, I would just say it's very exciting when you have an idea, but then you see that idea kind of taken so much further than you thought it could go. And so this food exploration and data visualization that this team did, right, I could just so see it being clinically useful. So I'm just very excited about turning it into a more app-based application so that kids could actually use it to improve their nutrition. So
yeah. Are you working on that as a maybe next step for this, or?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of our Data Plus students are on with us for the fall because they got attached to the team, and so we're going to continue to work on making this a viable product.
Fantastic.
And Alex and Young Kyung were outstanding, and Julia were outstanding mentors. So we were very lucky. Guillermo and I just kind of sat back.
That's wonderful. Do we have other questions from our audience? We had a couple people pop in a little late, so if they, okay, so we have one. For your food preference confusion matrix, why do you think your model predicted most of them, Arfid? Yeah, this is from Jungi. Yeah.
I think the algorithm on its own found like the highest accuracy rate when it just made these false positives. So I guess that shows that the variables themselves weren't the most predictive at the moment, because it found that just by lumping all these people into false positives, it could find the highest rate of accuracy. But
all right. Oh, I have a question about your skills. When you came to Data Plus, I don't know what your skill set was like in terms of coding, but did you have to learn a bunch of new tools over the summer? And if so, what did you have to learn, and how do you feel about it now?
yeah, I certainly learned a lot. I coded a little bit in Python in Comp Sci 101, but like never really in terms of data science stuff. So I think it was really cool to learn that this summer.
I think I mentioned before that I totally started from scratch. I was teaching myself Python at the start of the summer. So this has definitely been a very valuable experience for me. I'm looking forward to taking these skills into my future research.
Yeah, I had also taken Comp Sci 101, and that was the extent of my Python coding. But it was also really cool to learn about some of the packages used in data science, like pandas and scikit-learn. And for the web page, I worked quite a bit with JavaScript in D3, which, I'd taken a workshop in JavaScript before. It was like one of the innovation collabs, but that was just it was just like very introductory. And this gave me a lot of practice, because when you actually apply it, it's much different from just hearing about it or seeing somebody else do it. So I found that really valuable.
For me, I'm from data science program, so I already have several data science project experience. But since this project are mainly from the course, so the data set I use is, like toy data set, or a data set which is cleaned, and somebody already used it. So I didn't find out big problem from that. But for this project, since I work with real world data from the survey data, so I have to kind of like clean the data or figure out how should I use the data. So during this thinking process, I think it's very important for me, not just like applying, a lot of machine learning package without thinking anything about the data, but think the data first. Yeah.
Great. Has this, sorry, go ahead. Somebody else talking? Thought I was cutting someone else off, but I guess not. I was going to ask if this has affected your career trajectory, or what your plans are going through the Data Plus experience and working with all this data and learning languages you didn't know, and how has that affected your outlook?
I mean, for me,
oh, sorry.
You go ahead, Michelle. No, it's okay.
Okay, I was gonna say it's a little early for me to tell, because I'm only a rising sophomore. I think I'm going to be computer science major, so this was definitely really helpful in terms of teaching me to work with new packages, like I said, and giving me practice with the languages. So I definitely see myself using this stuff, or using what I've learned, but I don't know exactly what direction I'm going to go in.
I guess for me, I'm a little older. I'm a rising senior now, so I'm starting to think about what I'm going to do. And, I'm pre-med, so I'm planning on going to med school. But I think the application of this data directly to like a clinical setting and seeing like the direct impact, like this tool that our team created is going to be used directly to help treat kids, I think was a really valuable experience for me and something that I would like to carry on as a clinician researcher.
Yeah, as a rising junior who's pre-med and computer science, I just really enjoyed how this project kind of tied both my passions together and allowed me to apply something that I'm really interested in. So.
Yeah, as the master student, who is the oldest one in this team. And even I had some work experience as well. So for me, this project really teach me about like how when I treat different data, how should I think about the what the data really means. I mean the data source, because I think when I learned a lot about the data science in the master program, I just sometimes I will forget to think about what the data set really means. So this really reminded me, and this is the first time I use join this kind of project. Like the project will end up with helping the kids to improve their nutrition. Like previously, I just work with data set that will increase the profit of my customers. So I think it's a very different aspect to think about what can I do with machine learning. So I think this is a very good experience for me and will affect me when I find the data scientist job in the future. I will have more different way to think about what I'm doing and how can I do.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Do we have any follow-up questions before we wrap up the session? Well, I just want to thank you all for working on this, and I'm really impressed with it. I think it's super cool, and I'm really excited to see where your work goes. It looks like this is going to go forward in some really important ways. So thank you so much for your work and, you know, dealing with all the challenges of being virtual this summer. You did wonderful. Yeah. Check out some other rooms, everyone who's here. You know, we do have some other rooms, and pretty soon here we will have yet another session coming up, and that is going to be the security threat hunting group. And that will be at 3 o'clock. So feel free to stick around here or go visit some other rooms as well. Thanks so much.